Join the Commercial UAV Expo on September 6th through the 8th in Las Vegas to connect, learn, and drive the industry forward. Use code SAVE100 in all caps for a free Expo Hall Pass or $100 off the cost of a conference pass. Go to expouav.com for more information and to register.
There's a thing in construction called rework, which is essentially where you have to move dirt twice, and that's incredibly bad for the financials. Often civil construction is a low margins business, so anytime you've got to move things more than once, that's a really big problem. So having a better understanding of your site and having multiple teams able to see where all the quantities are and where they need to go, that's going to help those instances of rework from occurring.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 373. Can drones move mountains? Well, maybe not on their own, but they can make it easier for earthwork companies to do their job. Richard Hordem-Gibbings is Director of Partnerships at Propeller. Propellor is a global leader in 3D mapping and data analytics solutions. The Australian company was founded in 2014 by Rory Miguel and Francis Vierboom. It creates tools and software for construction companies, mines, quarries, and landfills to collect, process, and visualize accurate survey data. Some of the world's leading heavy civil and resource operations trust Propeller to answer critical questions about their site's progress, productivity, work quality, and safety. At Propeller, Richard works with a variety of drone partners worldwide. He's been with the company for more than 8 years and has many insights into the use of drones in the heavy construction industry. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, Richard talks about Propeller, the use of drones in the earthworks industry, and how Propeller is leading efforts to help these companies find greater efficiencies and ROI. But before we hear from Richard, I want to thank those of you who are supporting my podcast and have joined the community of Drone Radio Show advocates. As a Drone Radio Show advocate, you'll be able to talk about current shows, bounce around ideas for future episodes, suggest questions of upcoming guests, and gain access to exclusive content. To become a Drone Radio Show advocate, go to patreon.com/Drone Radio Show. And by the way, if you have a great story on the use of drones that you'd like to share in a podcast, contact me at randy@droneradioshow.com. So let's find out how drones can help earthwork companies move mountains with Richard Hordem-Gibbings of Propeller. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Richard to introduce himself.
Thanks for having me on, Randy. So my name is Richard Hordem-Gibbings and I run partnerships at Propeller Aero.
Richard, what is Propeller?
At its most simplistic, Propeller helps customers collect, process, and visualize their survey data. And when we say customers, we're talking about, survey data that's been collected with drones, mainly for construction, aggregates, mining, and waste management.
There are several companies that collect data. What makes Propeller Aero different from other mapping services?
We do similar things to a number of other companies. I think the biggest point of differentiation for us is that laser-like focus on the heavy industries we work with. So again, construction, aggregates, mining, and waste management. We sort of tend to stay in our lane. We know where we've got a strength in those industries and we don't really deviate from that.
How do the services that Propeller provides translate into value to your clients?
So I think it's important to sort of understand how we differentiate ourselves first. And I'm obviously heavily biased, but from a product perspective, the data quality and the industry focus and the tools, I won't say industry leading because it's a very overused term, but in that business, we are the best. Our competitors have great products, but for customers in those industries that are really serious about their survey programs, it's a really clear and easy choice. And it probably doesn't get enough attention, but our biggest point of differentiation is just how good our support team is. They're world-class. Our customers love them. As you'd know, drones are not infallible. Survey data is often imperfect. And so whether it's on the hardware or the data side, there's a lot of issues that customers can run into. And so it was really important for us to be able to meet the expectations that you'd have when you're effectively allowing a product or service to fundamentally change how you do business. So it's a huge amount of trust that's placed in our team, and it's not a responsibility we take lightly. And then the other massive difference between Propeller and other companies is we have this great competitive advantage in the Airpoints, which hopefully many of you will recognize as the smart ground control targets. They act as ground control, they act as a base, and we use them for our very simple Propeller PPK workflow.
I'm not familiar with Airpoints. Can you tell me more about them and how they're used?
Yeah, so the Airpoint is effectively a smart ground control point. So you're looking at a high density foam pad that has yellow and black sort of checkerboard markings on it, much like a lot of traditional ground control markings. If you're not familiar with ground control, basically what it is a point that the XYZ of that point is known. So you can either shoot that in with a rover, or it can be an established mark, or it can be an error point. But essentially, because you know the XYZ of that ground control point, when you then do your drone survey, you have one or multiple of these points that, because you know their exact location, you can then use those in your processing of your map to make sure that it's accurate, because if nothing else, at least all of your points in those photos in the overall map will be accurate. So traditionally, that was done by shooting a spot with a base and rover and then spray painting a cross or something of that nature. So what we did was we just kind of updated that for the next generation, and we made this very simple foam pad, single button operation, solar panel, GPS chip in the center, Wi-Fi connection. And so the pilot or whoever's assisting with the survey basically presses the button, lays it out in the sun. They may do this several times, goes and does their drone survey, turns off the Airpoint, uploads it to the cloud, and then they've got that perfectly collected XYZ position to use with their photogrammetry.
How many are needed for a typical mission?
Depends on your workflow. So the traditional logic is that the more ground control you have, the better. And certainly with, some of the technology workflows from a couple of years ago, before sort of cheaper, more available RTK, PPK technology became available, that was how we do it. Most customers might have a Phantom 4 Pro, and we'd recommend they take 10 Airpoints, lay them out around the site, one in all the corners, a few in the middle, make sure you hit the high and low elevation points. But then you have this whole step change for the industry where you suddenly have mapping drones that can produce very high accuracy RTK geotags at a price that's affordable for a lot of companies. So what we then did was we went to DJI and we said, hey, this P4 Phantom 4 RTK looks fantastic. We don't want to sell it with your base and rover though. We're going to use it with an Airpoint and do a PPK workflow, which is post-processing. So for that drone, which has high accuracy geotags already, customers can get away with a single Airpoint on a smaller site. So they just throw down one Airpoint, they let it bake, and then what we do is we correct the already high accuracy geotags from that higher accuracy drone to a higher level of precision with the data from the Airpoint. And then you get, if everything goes well, 1/10 of a foot accuracy on your map across that site.
Wow, that process has really become complex. I know it's all automated, but there are a lot of things going on. It used to be take a drone out and shoot some images from the sky.
I mean, that's still effectively what it is, but now the process is almost easier. So the technology might be more complex in terms of what's happening on the back end, but for the customer, they're just pressing go on the drone and they're making sure they put an Airpoint out. And that's pretty much as complex as it gets.
What type of company is best suited for using Propeller?
I suppose our most common customer looks like someone that's doing earthworks or essentially moving dirt with big yellow pieces of iron. And, we're lucky enough to work with some of the really big companies over here in the US. They have an index called the ENR 400, which is the 400 largest construction companies. We work with over 50 of those, but typically a Propeller customer looks like what we call a mum and pop excavating company. So it might be ABC Brothers Contracting or XYZ and Sons Excavating. And we work with thousands of those customers across North America in every state.
On the company website, there's a mention of Trimble Stratus. What is Trimble Stratus and how does it relate to Propeller?
That's a great question. So Trimble hopefully is a name that a number of your listeners will be familiar with. They're a big GPS company. They're a great company and we're very fortunate to have a really good working relationship with them for now over a number of years. So Trimble has a distribution arm called SciTech, and SciTech provides construction and survey tech systems, services, software to the heavy civil construction industry. So lots of software packages, different Trimble softwares, and also fitting out heavy equipment with GPS and machine control systems. So SciTech distributes an exclusive product called Trimble Stratus, which is built off our Propeller platform.
Does Propeller perform the missions?
Our sales team will sometimes do a demo flight, but primarily what we are doing is we are empowering companies to do that drone collection themselves. So we're coming in when they've already got an established drone program and they want to upgrade it, or they're a company that is new to drone surveying and they're looking to get the benefit of a program for their own company. So we don't provide the services arm like a lot of DSPs do. We simply get the customer set up with their own in-house program and we give them the hardware and the software and the support to go and do that with confidence.
Okay, so now I'd like to talk about a couple of case studies. I read about one partnership with a Scandinavian company called NMC Infrastructure, where they needed to map a 9-kilometer railway project. What did that entail?
So I suppose I'll start off that by explaining that in addition to the US and the Asia Pacific region, we've also got a really healthy presence in the European market. As you said, NCC, they're a massive Scandinavian general contractor, and they've got all sorts of construction projects spread across Norway, Finland, Denmark, and Sweden. You touched on, so that particular case study, that was a 9-kilometer railway project that their infrastructure group was doing back in 2019, a really big project, 1 million cubic meters of dirt and 4 bridges. Now, as we often see with some of the early customers that come to us, they were already a very advanced customer when it came to drone technology. They had an established program. They were using Agisoft, which is a great photogrammetry desktop software. So we weren't necessarily providing NCC with anything out of the ordinary compared to other customers, but like a lot of customers do, they started out with Propeller because they were essentially outgrowing their existing workflow and hitting a bottleneck with the amount of data that they could self-process. So we provided them with a managed solution, which saved them at that time 6 hours or more on every single survey. They also found that it was a lot easier to share data with our cloud platform. Survey data traditionally, and even still today, it's often very heavily siloed. It's very difficult sometimes to get the answers to questions from within the survey team. And so being able to easily share the data securely was a big win for them in terms of getting the data easily to more employees and the teams that needed it. And then finally, for NCC, they were able to avoid and resolve a number of disputes with subcontractors on the project because they had that up-to-date information that effectively acts as an audit trail. So if you're looking at things, trying to identify issues the next day, as opposed to weeks later, you're much likely to have a favourable outcome. And that's one of the many benefits of any well-implemented drone program, whether they're using our products or not. That's not exclusive to Propeller. If you've got a good drone program and you are recording, you're getting a snapshot of a moment of time of what's there, that's incredibly valuable when you're coming back at a later period to work out what's happened, where and when.
And of course, the data can be converted to 3D maps, right?
So we actually deliver that 3D map as a standard output for every single survey. So basically the workflow is that the customer will go and fly their site with the drone. They then drag and drop all those images into Propeller. We spin up the processing, and within 24 hours, often less, they've got a accurately processed 3D map of their work site. They can then do a number of things with that. They can obviously share it internally securely. They can use that 3D map within the browser to do a lot of measurements and calculations, whether that's a cross-section or a cut and fill, or comparing it to a design. Or, like most construction companies do, they're probably using a dozen other software packages. So they can then export that 3D map from Propeller into whatever size or format they want. And that's going to play nicely with their suite of other software projects, so that different teams that might be using BIM 360 or Autodesk or Procore or whatever it might be can put the file into those other software programs and do their own analysis.
Once again, for NCC Infrastructure, what were the biggest lessons learned or the results that they obtained from using Propeller?
By us providing an automated managed solution on the processing, we were saving them 6 or more hours for every survey. There's lots of good do-it-yourself photogrammetry solutions, but if you are a large company, once you start using drone data, you're going to get addicted to it. You're going to find more uses for it, and that's going to mean more data. And so eventually, you're going to hit a bottleneck with what you can achieve with a self-processing solution. And so what we offer is a managed solution where it's all done automatically. It scales in the cloud. And so therefore, you can process almost an infinite amount of data, and you're not going to have that bottleneck internally.
That's great. Now, a second case study involved mapping a 40-mile area for Nevada gold mines. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, so Nevada Gold were an interesting one. So they have a guy called Ben McKnight who sort of runs their drone program, runs their survey team. And he was actually looking at aerial technology as early as 2008. So back then, the drones weren't necessarily well known, but you could still get aerial mapping done from a light plane, and there was a degree of photogrammetry that could be done with that. So by the time they stumbled across Propeller, they were already very familiar with drone technology and what you could do with it with regards to stockpiles. And that was their biggest use case, just measuring stockpiles. And I'm not sure if listeners will be aware of this, but in terms of good uses for drone technology, measuring stockpiles is almost the perfect use case because the shape, it's a nice lump. It doesn't have tricky concave sides or sharp edges. And so it almost perfectly works with photogrammetry, which is why stockpile measurements was actually one of the first sort of established commercial uses of photogrammetry. So what they were doing was pretty standard, but what was different about Nevada was their appetite for the data. So they were effectively looking to fly these, very large stockpile yards every single day, because if you don't have a good understanding of what your production of materials is and what's actually sitting in those piles, that can be worth, thousands, hundreds of thousands, in some cases, millions of dollars of inventory. And if you don't have a good understanding of what's there can be very real financial implications. So Nevada was flying every single day. And again, it's a little bit boring, but they were sort of hitting a threshold where they simply couldn't process that volume of data. But a managed solution like Propeller that can process reliably, consistently, and most importantly, accurately, that saves them a ton of time. And then they can just worry about the actual production and management of their aggregates inventory because the measurement side of it is taken care of.
So it sounds like one of the key benefits of the service is its ability to scale large amounts of data. Is that a fair assessment?
I think we certainly pride ourselves in our processing infrastructure. I think you'd find that some of our competitors can also process a lot of data and turn it around relatively quickly. I'm not sure they could do it with the reliability and the accuracy that we provide.
You mentioned one of the broader ways in which data is used by earthwork companies is to help with the inventory of stockpiles. Are there other situations where drone mapping data can really provide benefits to those companies?
Yeah, there absolutely are. And I think as the technology is becoming more widespread, what we're learning is it can actually be different things to different people depending on your role within the company. Sort of expand on that a little bit. Primarily, the survey team or the survey manager in a construction company, they're the person that's traditionally been in charge of collecting this data. So when we look at the survey manager or the survey team, they're using Propeller to just get accurate tenth of a foot surveys of their site. They're doing it for the obvious time savings because they're sending a drone up for half an hour instead of walking around the site for hours staking it out. And then they're able to answer questions very quickly. But that's just the survey manager. If you then look at the rest of that construction company, the owner might be using it for change orders, handling redesigns of a project, and actually getting paid. If you can measure your quantity of material on that site, how much cut and fill has changed between in a week or over a month, you can actually use that quantity of material moved to submit accurate pay quantities to either bill a project owner or to provide payments to your subcontractors. Now, if we get a bit more granular, a project manager might be using that exact same map, but they're doing progress checking. How are we on plan to finish this project in 9 months the way the owner expects? They're doing some of that stockpile reporting that we touched on with Nevada. They're doing visual site tracking. What looks incorrect here? Can we identify issues before they become really big issues? And then even before the project starts, you might have an estimator and they're using that same map to better understand what sort of bid should they make on this project. Traditionally, when you get information about a project before you step foot on the site, that information is often horribly outdated. And so the piece of paper that's telling you this is what the site looks like no longer matches what the site is, whether it's because of illegal dumping or material washing away or whatever it may be. So by using a drone, you can simply survey that site before you even step foot on it, get a good understanding of what's actually there, how much that actually matches what you've been told is there, and then you can use that to update your bid.
It also sounds like it's a great tool for improving communication across teams.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And I think the strongest example of that is where you're avoiding rework. And because other than simply saving you survey costs, it's very hard to quantify, well, what's the return on investment on a drone program? And so we've spent a lot of time talking to customers and saying, okay, you're telling us that you're getting these incredible efficiency gains from your drone program, but what does that mean in real life? And they say, well, for example, when we're looking at estimating, we can tighten up the bid quantities, which I mentioned, but they're actually understanding ideal haul distances and routes so they can communicate with their drivers, hey, this needs to be done differently. And you're also seeing visibility into potential problematic areas, so less pinch points on haul roads so that they can make sure that all of their trucks are moving dirt efficiently. They're actually using that data to not just understand the ideal haul distances and routes, but also identify pinch points on the haul roads as well. So they can then communicate to the drivers, help them understand where the potential issues are and make sure that that dirt's being moved efficiently. There's a thing in construction called rework, which is essentially where you have to move dirt twice, and that's incredibly bad for the financials. Often civil construction is a low margins business. So anytime you've got to move things more than once, that's a really big problem. So having a better understanding of your site and having multiple teams able to see where all the quantities are and where they need to go, that's going to help those instances of rework from occurring.
Let's talk a little about the company itself. First of all, how long has it been in business?
So Propeller was co-founded in Sydney, in Australia. I'm from Australia as well, by Rory and Frank back in 2014. Interestingly enough, they were both at the time working for a drone delivery startup called Flirty, which I believe has just renamed itself Skydrop. So they were just loving, very deep in early stage drone delivery technology. And I think there was sort of a gradual progression amongst both of them that they saw that there was likely years of regulatory hurdles in the way of the true commercialization of drone delivery. I know, Amazon and a few other companies are making some very fast progress at the moment. But in 2014, that seemed like it was too far of a horizon away. But anyway, so while they were, building and crashing drones, they stumbled across the magic of photogrammetry and thought, hey, this is actually a really good use for drone technology that exists today. And it just sort of grew from there. Obviously, Australia has a lot of open space, which is great for drone tech. It's got a lot of mining, a lot of aggregates production, and they just sort of put two and two together, and it grew from there.
How long have you been with the company?
I've been with Propeller for 7 years. I've held a number of roles over that time, but most recently I was running the commercial side of Propeller's hardware business, and I'm now responsible for all of our partnerships with all of our software distributors, as well as various drone and hardware manufacturers. So basically, I'm just trying to keep a very diverse group of companies happy and healthy and well supported by our team.
From your perspective over the past 7 years, what have been the greatest challenges in growing the company?
I think the challenges have been constant and numerous. I think one of the biggest constants is that if your company is growing, then that means that nothing is ever truly done. So you'll build something that works for 10 customers, but then it breaks for 20. Or you might have a good internal process for a team of 20 employees, which then no longer works for a team of 50 who are now distributed geographically. So it's this constant cycle of improvement and determining which of your growing pains you can live with, which fires you're going to put out first and what needs immediate attention and resources.
What have you enjoyed most about working at Propeller?
I think for me personally, it's been incredibly rewarding and interesting just watching the company's progression. When I joined Propeller, it was half a dozen people in a room. And now we stand today, August 2022, and we've got about 200 employees in 4 countries. So seeing that change occur firsthand and sort of the rate of change, it feels like everything, it doesn't matter whether you joined 5 years ago or last month, everything is always different. And so that's been really, really special. And then I think a company like that, you don't have potentially as much free time as you might in other sorts of roles. And so just working with some really great people who have almost become like family in a way.
In September, the Commercial UAV Expo will be held in Las Vegas. Does Propeller plan to exhibit at the Expo?
Yes, so Propeller will be at Commercial UAV. I think this is our 3rd or 4th year in a row. We're really looking forward to it. I'll certainly be there on the Propeller booth along with Ryan and Brendan and Steve. Look out for our brightly coloured Propeller shirts. We'll be there with some drones and the Airpoints. And yeah, it's normally a great conference. We went last year, obviously after the 2-year hiatus, and I was shocked at how busy it was. It was a really good conference. So yeah, very excited to get back there this year.
From the exhibitor standpoint, what do you see as the value in a show like this?
From my perspective, it's probably twofold. As an exhibitor, particularly with the Airpoints product. So when we talk about our software, we stay in our lane. We go after those 4 industries I've mentioned pretty heavily. With the Airpoints, we still aren't close to understanding their full applications. And so when you get a broader community conference like Commercial UAV, where you've got people from all spectrums of the drone industry, we end up having a lot of really good conversations with people that are really at the bleeding edge of drone technology. And a lot of those, it's just very interesting conversations and we can't help them. But there's also a number of those conversations like, well, hang on, would our product be of any use in that scenario? And there's enough of those conversations that you come away from the conference with sort of a book full of ideas of, well, hang on, this might be a bust, but we should at least look into that. And so it's kind of because you're working with that bleeding edge of the technology, you just learn so much from those few days. I think the second part for me is just the efficiency of catch-ups, right? So, I've got half a dozen hardware manufacturers that I need to maintain good relationships with. We've got distributors of our Airpoints that are exhibitors themselves. We've got customers that effectively go to every single drone conference like clockwork. So for me, a few days in Vegas, I can get so much work done that I just wouldn't be able to get done without weeks and weeks of travel and dozens of different meetings.
What's the future look like for Propeller?
If I had a crystal ball, I'd love to know as well. But I think if there's one certainty, it's that the drone industry will not stay still. And so we'll need to continually adapt to make sure that we're ahead of those customer preferences and the ways that people consume data. I think one of the obvious trends that we're already seeing is that as more and more drone manufacturers come out with good products, people are making different choices for various reasons. And so, 2 years ago, we might have seen 95% of our customers using a certain type of drone. And now we're starting to see, more drones become popular. We didn't really have any customers using VTOL drones a couple of years ago. And now we have a very large segment of customer that, are using either the Wingtra or the Quantum drones. And then you're starting to just see a lot more choice. So we'll need to adapt to those customer preferences. We'll also need to continue to monitor and adapt for the way that people want to consume their data. Do they want to get the answers themselves? Do they just want an email or a dashboard that tells them the answers they need to know? Are they using a computer? Are they using their mobile phone? All that sort of stuff. So there's obviously some exciting products and features that we'll build over that time as well. But I think a lot of it will just be making sure that we're on top of the overall industry trends.
In addition to the technology, what factors contribute to Propeller's success?
I think that there are probably two things that stand out for me with relation to Propeller. I think the biggest factor is we've been able to find and retain a really amazing group of people. So I think whether you're looking at some of our earliest developers or our ops people right through to our most recent hires, it's a highly talented, great group and genuinely wonderful people. Work as a team, leave your ego at the door. It's very strong in our culture. And then the second thing I think Propeller did was just get obsessive about our product market fit for our core software offering and keep doubling down for those industries. So construction, mining, aggregates, waste management. So if we look at other industries like agriculture, thermal, multispectral, infrastructure inspections, it's probably unlikely that Propeller is going to be a good fit. However, if you're moving material with big, heavy equipment, whether that be dirt, metal, rock, or waste, we have a deep understanding of your business and the impact that this information can have on your operations.
As head of partnerships for Propeller, what advice would you offer for those trying to nurture long-term relationships?
Let's make sure we're doing a good job of actively making sure that we're helping customers set their expectations correctly. I think the drone industry has a bit of history of, in some cases, selling magic beans, and drone's not going to be the perfect solution for every problem. It's going to solve a lot of problems, but some things are just not going to be good for a drone. And so let's focus on where there's a really good fit. And if we're not quite there yet, let's make sure we're setting expectations accordingly with the customer base.
And for my final question, Richard, what message would you like to leave regarding the future of the drone industry?
I suppose it's twofold. I think one is keep going. I think there's often a lot of negativity around the drone industry sometimes that, there's all these sort of false dawns, but having now been heavily invested in the industry for 7 years, it's just amazing at the progress that so many individuals and companies are making. So keep going. It feels like we're just getting started, and I'm really excited to see where we all are in another 7 years.
That's it for episode 373 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Richard Hordem-Gibbings of Propeller. I want to thank Richard for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Propeller or want to connect with Richard, check out the webpage at propelleraero.com. Don't forget the UAV Expo on September 6th through the 8th. You can register at expouav.com. Use code SAVE100 for a free Expo Hall Pass or $100 off a conference pass. If you like the Drone Radio Show, then become part of the community of Drone Radio Show advocates, where we can connect in a more informal basis. For more information, go to patreon.com/Drone Radio Show. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.